The superpower that every citizen has is the ability to control where they spend their time, money, and attention. By focusing these on supporting local businesses, you are having a profound impact on your friends, your family, and your local community. So if you want to change the world, you can start with buying local.
The Eden Center is a private psychiatry practice that focuses on the root cause of mental health conditions. We believe in brain-based treatment that incorporates the tenets of good mental health: nutrition, sleep, mindfulness, exercise, and social interactions. Whether you need help with mental health, addiction and recovery, or general wellness, the Eden Care Center can help shape you into your best you.
Welcome, everyone, to Buying Local. I'm your host, Mike Nelson, joined by multiple special guests today. We're actually doing one of our little roundtable discussions here. Today, we're going to be talking about real estate, which seems to be still a crazy thing. It hasn't really calmed down, but we're gonna get into that. So I'm joined with us today. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, who you are and what you do. Dan?
Hi, thanks for having us. Dan Wade from Ionello Anderson, real estate law firm, 4 offices. We make it convenient for clients to close. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. If you're looking to buy land, Dan's your man. That's the way to go. That's the way to go. And Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Yes, Mark Pawlows from Freedom One Funding, full service mortgage broker located in the Capital District, 21 years in business as of this last December, doing residential mortgages of all types. VA, FHA, conventional, investment property loans, second homes, etc.
Nice. And last but certainly not least, Lori, introduce yourself, who you are and what you do, please.
Hi, Lori Danussi from Kelly Kiley Realty. I am in residential real estate, customizing the experience for the client, but we're located out of Guilderland. We helped over 164 clients last year,
Wow.
Doing about $60 million in business. We're a boutique provider. So that just means we're a smaller brokerage. There are about 10 of us there. And I love new construction and love walking the first-time home buyer through the process. And I feel like for every heart, there is a home.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, I appreciate you guys coming in and joining us today and talking. And hopefully we're going to give the listening community a little bit, of the latest and greatest, I guess, with the real estate market, because it's pretty crazy. And I have some very specific questions. But first, before we get into those very specific questions, and because I'm going to ask you guys to shine up your crystal ball for me later on and let us know what is going to happen. Give me a little bit, what is happening right now? I feel like there's just so much confusion in the marketplace as far as, is it a good time to buy, a good time to sell? Is it, what is happening?
Yeah, it is pretty crazy out there. What we are seeing, though, that's helping spark the market a little bit is that recently interest rates have come down a little bit. And so we're starting to see things pick up a little bit earlier than we normally would. And you have to think back to, like, during COVID times, it was a little crazy. Houses were flying off the market as soon as they came on. And now we're finally getting back into that regular cycle of being a little bit slower during the winter and busier during the summer. So
is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? I know for a while there, obviously it was a seller's market, right?
It's definitely still a seller's market.
Yeah.
There is such a lack of inventory.
Still.
And there are more buyers out there looking to buy a home than there are sellers. And it's almost like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
If I'm a seller and I need to buy, do I try and find that house first before I list? And with the interest rates going up, that has really stopped a few people from listing their houses. So new construction just can't keep up with the number of people looking to build a house. And that can take 9 to 12 and sometimes 18 months. So it really is that inventory that's still driving it to be a seller's market.
To be a seller's market. Yeah, it's really interesting because what do people do? This is just such a weird thing to me. Like, you talk about first time home buyers, right? Like, what does a first time home buyer do? Like, I bought my first house 20 years ago, I guess, for $80,000 or something like that. You know what I mean? And it was a flip, obviously, but now it's obviously that does not exist anymore. No. But rents and apartments are super expensive. I was talking to someone the other day that they're paying $2,200 a month.
Yeah. So the problem you have is that people need a place to live. So what do? So people are spending, I think, a lot more time looking to buy a home. And in the interim, they're getting stuck having to rent. One of the areas where I have an office up in Glens Falls, there's a lot of building and action going on, building apartment buildings, because they're building places for people to live. And, you can get the rent money to come in. So as an investment, if you want to be a landlord, forget the landlord-tenant laws for a moment.
I was going to that's going to be my follow-up question.
But just from dollars and cents, you can get a lot more money out of a rental property right now if you have multiple units in it. And so I think people are getting stuck having to rent and spending a lot longer looking for that home that they want to buy because there aren't as many homes coming on the market. So, Lori, you probably can speak to, there's still multiple offer situations for like a reasonably priced home.
And not as crazy as it was. We're not seeing those 20 offers, 50, 60, 70 over the list price. But we're seeing a lot more condominiums, townhouses, where somebody, which I love to see, a younger person looking for a duplex or multifamily so that they can have someone else help them with their mortgage.
How do they even not do that? Like, I would almost think that you need to do that right now in order, because what's a starter home going for right now?
Probably over 200,000,
right?
You're about 250, and it does depend on the area. But you know, like downtown Albany, there's a balance of if you can get a house for a little bit less, your taxes are a little bit higher.
Sure.
So it's really about the why and what your priorities are.
Yeah.
But that's really about our average in the capital region is 290. Average sale price.
So there was just I guess an article that came out in a Realtor magazine the other day that said we had the least number of sales of homes in the U.S. in 2023, going all the way back to 1995. Mm-hmm. That's how long it's been, 22 years or whatever it was, close, a little over 20 years. And they're almost 30 basically. And back then the average price was something like $115,000, and now it's like $309 for the median sales price. So things have changed, but the building of new homes has not kept up with basically with demand. So I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I think you're also seeing the average age of the first-time home buyer continues to increase because you can't afford to buy a home until later in life.
Well, that was going to be my question. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about the average sales price for a home is $309,000, what's the average income of people in this market? Can they afford that?
I think I saw a statistic the other day where 2023 was the first year where the median income did not give you enough money to be able to afford the median price on a starter home. For the past 15, 20 years, it's always been the median income was greater than the median sales price of an average starter home. Oh, really? And 2023 was the first year where that was upside down. And that's a little concerning.
Yeah. I can't even imagine if I was my younger self, what would I do? I'd be stuck renting an apartment, but still spending so much money. I just don't understand the market right now.
And I think one of the other shifts too is, at least with my clients, they're saving money. So they're not looking for concessions. They're not needing that seller to have a stronger offer. They're not needing that seller to contribute any portion of their sale price towards closing costs. So it's amazing to me that, I love to see 27, 30-year-olds who have $70,000 or $80,000, which is a huge amount of money. That's what you paid for your first house.
Right.
And that's what they're using because they're a smarter consumer.
It's crazy. Yeah, my first house, $80,000, and I think I got 106% financing or something like that.
Mine was $85,000, and I was paying 12% interest.
Wow. Yeah, no, I that's super high. What is it right now? I mean, we just saw, and so that was one of the things, right? We just saw this morning reports come out, GDP's up 3.3%, adjusted for inflation, it's like 4.9 or something along those lines, yes. Which means the Fed's not lowering their rates anytime soon. They're going to keep them high. So where are we at with interest rates?
We're probably in the mid sixes right now. And, for somebody with really good credit for a conventional loan, we were probably down and closer to 6.25, a few weeks back. And it's kind of ticked back up just a little bit because of the positive economic news that's come out. More jobs have been created than expected, and GDP is higher, like you said, and some of those other, indicators are coming back to, to showing that the economy is not really slowing down as much as they were thinking it was.
Yeah.
But it's also, a full percentage point below what it was in the pretty recent past. I mean, it was up into the 7 3/4 range for a while. So,
which you said 12. I think I was like 7 1/4, 7.5, because that was like right before the big purchase boom in 2000. I don't know what was it. Must have been 2004, I think. But and those were good interest rates at that point. Like when I got like 7.5, like that was pretty decent. 6.5 doesn't sound awful to me.
No.
Is everybody just so spoiled?
Yes, that's just that. Especially the younger folks. They don't know anything. Any different than rates in the in the 3s.
That's all they heard,
the
right?
2s and maybe the 4s. Where people like us have seen interest rates that were higher, or we've known friends, family, and everything else that have had interest rates that were much higher.
People like us, Mark. What is that supposed to mean?
People over 22.
And so one of the things that I've started to see at multiple closings that I've gone to, because not only do we represent individual purchasers or sellers, but we also represent some of the banks who are lenders on some of these closings, and starting to see a pretty decent resurgence of adjustable rate loans.
Ooh.
Where people are getting into it's like a fixed adjustable where it's fixed at a low rate for about 10 years, and then it starts to adjust at whatever the market rate will be.
Those 228s and 525s and stuff like that, those coming back? Is that what?
Yeah, so I'm seeing rates for some of those like in the mid 5s to start with. And, what we try to tell people is to be smart about it. Watch the rates. If at some point it makes sense for you with closing costs and the interest rate that you might save, maybe you consider refinancing at some point and locking it in to a solid fixed rate if the rates come down at some point before that 10-year period is up.
Yeah, that's Mark. Help the listeners that maybe aren't familiar with that kind of
concept.
Mortgage product.
Sure.
Because what I hear, right, is I'm going to buy a house now. Let's just use easy numbers of $100,000, and I'm going to do a 30-year mortgage, but it's going to be fixed for a period of time, and then it goes adjustable. Sounds great, so long as the rates go down. Right. But if the rates go up, and I know that there's caps and other things on that too that people probably aren't familiar with, but talk us through that a little bit.
So there's a lot to consider when you're talking about an adjustable rate loan. So I'd say kind of the average probably term that where it's going to be fixed is probably 5 to 7 years. There are the 10-year fixed or 10-year adjustables where they're fixed for 10 years. Where they come in is somebody's buying their very first home, or somebody's in a relocation situation from with their employer, and they know they're not going to be in this house for 3 years, 5 years, and they're going to be moving. So in a situation like that, it definitely makes sense. Is anything a guarantee? No, of course. But a lot of people will go into it thinking there's no way they're going to be here for 10 years or even 7 years or maybe even 5. So, that would make sense for a person in that situation, in that scenario, to do an adjustable rate loan like that. But let's say you change your mind and you decide, you're not going to go anywhere, and all of a sudden the 5 years is up. Let's assume it's a 5-year adjustable 5-year ARM, they call it. And all of a sudden year 6, typically you can go up as much as 2% in one per year, usually at a maximum of 6% higher than when it starts at.
Yeah,
so
they put that in the note, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's say somebody's starting off with a 5.5%, like Dan was saying, and all of a sudden 5 years down the road, interest rates are much higher than that. That there's a good chance that rate will go in year 6 to 7%, and then in year 8 year 7 it could go to 2% higher. So all of a sudden within 3 years they could go up 6%, which would be a huge jump for somebody starting at 5 to end up at 11. Their mortgage payment would go up,
considerably.
Yes. So there is that risk.
Lori, talking about how long you stay in a home, do you know what the average is right now? The
average has shifted to about 15 years, but that really takes into account somebody like in Mark's position, what he was just talking about, where you're in that house 3 to 5 years, or in certain communities, there are people who have been in their homes 30 years, but the average is about 15 years right now. About 15
right now? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was wondering what that was. So you really got to roll into it with a good plan, I guess, right? As far as what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Is it a starter home or a forever home?
Forever home. That's why I keep saying I'm going to die in my house. Just hopefully not soon.
Right. And so for the first time home buyers or the people that are moving from one state to another, it's really important that they get connected with a good team that can educate them on what the process is in the area that they are looking, so that they really get as much information that they can to make the best decision that they can. Because like Lori and Mark have talked about, there's different scenarios for why people might want a different product. And there's lots of different products that are available. People just need to be educated about them so that they can find the right fit for them.
Might want to think about resale if you're not going to be there for a long time. Make sure this is a house that you can turn around and sell pretty easily in 5 years or 3 years, which, depending on, you don't want a very unique home could be difficult to sell if you're not going to plan on being there for a while.
Yeah, there's so many factors. And I feel like I used to understand real estate, and I definitely don't feel like I understand it anymore, because there's just so many factors. Things have changed so much, and things are just so up and down right now.
One of the things I wonder about with, people staying in their homes longer, not selling them, living in them longer. Usually, you would have the empty nest, right? People have raised kids go off to college. Then now I don't need as big of a home anymore. I can downsize. That's not really happening as much now. People are holding on to that home. I wonder if at some point we're going to see an increase in reverse mortgages, where people are hitting that age that you need to qualify, and now they can start taking money out of that equity to do repairs or do upkeep that they need to do on that larger home, and they're just going to stay put. I wonder if that's where we're headed.
Yeah, and that's the crystal ball question, right? Like, where are we headed? I think, Mark, you were saying that like new home construction is down comparatively from what it was 20 years
Historic
ago.
levels.
Historical
yes.
levels, yeah. And, why is that?
A part of it is regulations, red tape that builders have to go through, hoops that they have to jump through to get a development approved and started. It takes years, typically, from the time somebody identifies a piece of property that they can purchase, subdivide, develop, put the infrastructure in. I mean, it's a long-term major investment and time and money to get to that point. And, over the years, those regulations and have only increased. It's gotten harder.
They haven't gotten better.
It hasn't gotten any easier. Kind of like some of the rules and regulations in the mortgage business and realty business.
But we're in New York
business.
State. Everything's easy in New York State.
Yes, that's why so many people move out every year.
Yeah, some of these developments take an engineer or whoever owns that land sometimes 11 to 15 years just to get it approved for a subdivision. Wow. Yeah, there's water issues, in Bethlehem. Where is water going to come in? Is it going to be a septic system, which most people wouldn't think in the middle of the city in 2023 or 2024 that you'd be on a septic. There are water issues that cost water retention. That has to all be played out to make sure that, that land is doable, or, you're not going to have any water issues coming back from the town roads and things like that. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Speaking of Bethlehem, I don't think it's in force currently, but they actually put a development moratorium in for a number of years where you couldn't start a new project. So things like that certainly don't help, as far as new construction.
Yeah, there are certain communities where they don't want to grow at the same rate as others. And just finding that land right now is even a struggle. Because
they want to grow slower.
And then throw on top of that inflation, cost of supplies having gone up over the past year, issues with supply chain.
Are we still seeing that? Are we still seeing supply chain issues? I was actually wondering this the other day.
Most of the time that's going to be on a specialty order, like a black window versus a regular window. Right. But we're not really seeing what we saw, back in COVID.
Back in 21, 22, yeah. That was nuts.
It was nuts.
Yeah, there's a 40% increase in the cost to build a house.
Yeah.
And where we usually think of an escalation clause in an offer for a resale,
they
had escalation clauses that were starting to be put in for builders. So we will hold you to your contract up to X%. And if the cost for us to build goes over that, you can either agree to move forward and take on that cost, or we'll give you your deposit back and we'll build that house and sell it to somebody else.
Wow. Insane.
It's nuts.
It is nuts. It is nuts. And what about, do you guys have any thoughts on commercial? I keep reading and hearing on podcasts about commercial real estate is going to, basically the bottom's going to drop out of it this summer with all the mortgages and notes coming due. And there's just a lot of factors that are putting pressure on commercial. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
There's that. It's interesting because, right, during COVID, we all learned to work from home and work remotely. So we don't need, the theory is, right, we don't need commercial office space. But I start to read some of the opposite in some of the news, where a lot of companies are requesting or requiring their employees to come back to the office for a variety of reasons. And so, I wonder if the dropout might not be as big as we think it's going to be. I don't have a crystal ball, obviously. You want me to pull one out?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna defer to the experts over here,
these guys.
Mark and Lori.
I personally think it's going to be a challenge in that space for a number of years, because even though, like Dan said, it's not as prevalent as it was during COVID with people working from home. It's a new way of working in the and across the country. There's hybrid schedules. There's a number of people I know that work maybe 2 or 3 days a week from home, and they come to the office 2 or 3, and that's very common. So maybe you have a shared workspace. Maybe instead of 5,000 square feet, maybe your company only needs 2,500 square feet, because you're only going to have at most half of your employees at any given time in your office. So it's like a whole new way of thinking and way of operating. So I do think it's going to have an impact. I think it'll be pretty substantial. Certainly more so in the office space corridor than more of industrial or anything like that. That's different.
Well, I know that we've always, I don't say always, but when we came through 2008 and that bubble, and then the most recent circumstances with the real estate, I feel like our part of our little corner of the world here is kind of insulated from a lot of the things that other parts of the country see. And so I'm just wondering,
that's true.
Will we see that locally? Like, I'm sure in New York City,
yes,
major metro, LA, like there's going to be some pretty huge fallout for those folks.
We have a lot of government, especially in the cities in Albany, Saratoga, Schenectady, Detroit. We have a lot of government jobs, federal, local, state. We have that's a big part of the economy and a lot of the jobs in the area. So we are kind of insulated compared to a lot of other areas. But something you touched on a few minutes ago too. What about when people's rates are going to start coming up on the commercial properties?
Yeah.
So unlike with residential, where the vast majority of people that have a mortgage have a fixed rate mortgage, it's the opposite in commercial. It's almost no such thing as a fixed rate mortgage in commercial. Almost all commercial mortgages are adjustable to some sort. And so anybody that took one of those out back in the last, go back 12 months and, for 5 years prior to that, has got a super low rate. And those might be 5 years, 7 years, 10 years typically before they adjust. So a lot of those people, all of a sudden now their income may be on the downslide, and their mortgage payment's going to go through the roof.
It's going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
And plus then when you look at across the country with in a lot of the major cities, like I believe in, is it San Francisco or maybe LA? I can't remember, but there's a lot of defaults happening on commercial space because the crime rates are so high and people they're just abandoning their lease spaces. Like that also has a huge impact on commercial across the whole country, not just in those small or in those municipalities, but.
Well, here as well, we've seen a lot of co-work spaces come up in the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And we didn't really talk about, commercial, but what about the mall? What about things that you can now buy online? So a lot of those retail stores have disappeared because it's more online, or they have just one store in the area versus they used to have one in every mall. Look at all the changes that happened in Stuyvesant Plaza and how much turnover they had there. Yeah. So there are still products like your coffee shops and restaurants and things like that, but a lot of those retail stores have just abandoned their leases, has gone up, and they're choosing not to renew. Yeah,
that's been an interesting thing to watch with the malls.
It really has, right? Like a lot of them are trying to convert into entertainment spaces, or I always thought a really good idea for a mall, especially the ones that are single level, convert them into like senior living centers.
I thought I had heard that's what was going on with the Wilton Mall.
Right? Have your doctor, have your dentist, have all your services that you need there. You also can get your exercise because you can wheel around the mall, right?
You can wheel around the mall.
But it's all right there for you in one like almost like closed community type space. Yeah. I think it'd be an excellent use of that space.
I really thought I heard something like that with
that. I heard that was proposed. Actually, it was. I don't think it was a senior center. It was apartments. There was apartments proposed like over 200, I think. I don't know if it was 300, 400 apartments, like a substantial number of apartments was proposed for the Wilton Mall. There's a big portion of that that's empty and vacant, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. And then fill it in with restaurants and, pubs and different things that people would want to use that live there. That sounded like a great idea, but I think the town was against it, the town of Wilton. And I think they thought there was going to be unfair tax consequence to the town. I'm not sure exactly what the ramifications are, but because they're not paying school taxes, I guess, like in a home, right? You've got your, if you're purchasing a home, you're paying for county tax, and you're paying for school taxes and I think they thought they were going to get a disproportionate number of families in there that would be using the schools. I don't know exactly how that trickles down, but that was a concern.
Politics.
But on the flip side, if you bring in the restaurants, the pubs, are you going to bring in more sales tax revenue for the area?
Yeah.
People bring in money, like you talk about buying local and the power of putting your resources into your local community. What better way than to have a local community where they can keep that money recycling throughout that local community?
I agree. I think it sounded great. It's like a cruise ship, right? Like, you get a bunch of
like a docked cruise ship.
Yeah, it's like a docked cruise ship. Everything you need right there. Just walk around or wheel around.
Go to a movie, have some popcorn.
That's right. I'm so hungry. Everybody keeps mentioning food. I'm like, didn't get to eat lunch. So, and I don't want to keep you here all day here, guys. But, Lori, from a real estate standpoint, if, someone's on the fence, they're thinking about it, listing, or they're thinking about buying, but they're not sure, they're because there's just so much speculation, like what is it a right time, a good time? Like what advice would you give someone like that?
Of course, we always say now is the right time. It's always the right time. But I think it has to be the right time for you. You're not going to outpace inflation. You're not going to outpace the amount that the values are growing on these houses. You can't control the interest rate. So it really has to be is now the right time, because something that you would have bought a year ago, you're probably going to be in your monthly $200, $300, up to $500 more a month now for somebody who waited 6 months to see if the interest rates would come back down.
Right. So
it really has to, I think it's a new norm. And everybody that I'm talking to doesn't focus on the interest rate. They're focused on what can I get, where do I want to live, and making those decisions and those priority lists.
And that's so interest rates, because I feel like that's one of the two speculations, right? Are housing prices going to come down, which they're not.
No.
And it's like that. It's not happening. I don't see it either. And the other one is, our interest rate is going to come down. So Mark, where are we at with interest rates? What's the crystal ball say?
Interest rates will come down at some point. They will also go back up at some point.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to come down in the near future. Basically, some of the stuff we talked about today, and the economy just is not going to keep humming along, in my opinion, at the level it has. I think it's unsustainable to keep doing that, into perpetuity. So I do think, at some point there's going to be some issues there that are going to slow down the economy. And that once the economy slows down, interest rates will come down. Interest rates like bad news, unfortunately. So, if there's a recession, that's good for interest rates. If there's a war, that's usually good for interest rates.
Yeah.
If there's, pretty much moves in the opposite direction.
Anything
of the
bad happening
general economy, yes. So we're kind of like Debbie Downers over here. In the
right.
Business. We like
hoping
bad
for
news.
A tragedy. Yeah. And Dan, how about you? What predictions do you have here?
Yeah.
Or what advice would you give?
I mean, the advice is that I think it's always the right time to buy if you have the ability to make it happen. Like Lori said, you're not going to outpace people who try to time it right. It's kind of like the stock market. You're never going to time it exactly right. You can't predict what the interest rates are going to be. Like you said, house rates are going to continue to go up. So, I mean, there's a common phrase that people are using out there, which is marry the home, date the rate. Meaning buy the home, find the home that you love, make it happen, make it work. Watch the interest rates. If they drop at some point and it makes sense for you to do it, refinance into the lower rate and stay there for the long term.
Stay there for the long haul. Dan, if people want to learn more about you and what you do as a real estate, you're an attorney, but you focus on real estate, where do they find you?
Yeah, so again, I work for the law firm of Iannello Anderson. We have an office in Albany, in Clifton Park, Saratoga Springs, and Glens Falls. They can reach us at 518-371-8888. Our website is www.ialawny.com, or you can find me on socials. Look for Dan Wade, and you'll find me on socials.
The socials. How about you guys, Mark?
I can be found on the website at freedomonefunding.com with the one spelled out. So that's one way. And another way could be by phone call of 518-495-0047, which could be a text or a phone call. Easy to get in touch with me.
Nice. Lori?
Our offices are in Guilderland, right on Western Avenue in front of Stifles Plaza. You can find me at homesbydanussi.com or contact me directly at 518-596-9425.
Very nice. Guys, thanks so much for coming in and having this conversation and helping to educate me and everybody listening on what's going on in real estate.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Till next time, everybody. Thanks for listening. And as always, you can find our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, pretty much anywhere you get. I think we're even on Pandora now. For my producer tells me that's where the old people listen. I'm like, I have Pandora. But anyway, you can find us everywhere you get podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, and of course, episodes are listed on glensfallstoday.com and saratogabusinessreport.com. Thanks for listening.
When the crew shows up on the job, they're going to have a folder that's going to give them exactly everything that I saw right at my first inspection. They would make sure that your kitchen is completely covered in plastic, make sure that 100% of the water and degreaser that is being used to clean your system is all going exactly where we want it to go. After everything is protected, we go through the whole system, scraping it all down. We would apply our degreaser, do a complete rinse through, and once the system is cleaned completely to bare metal, we wipe the whole hood system out, polish it, take the canopy down, pack everything away, and put everything back the way it was, and we're out of there.
Performance Industrial.
The superpower that every citizen has is the ability to control where they spend their time, money, and attention. By focusing these on supporting local businesses, you are having a profound impact on your friends, your family, and your local community. So if you want to change the world, you can start with buying local.